Imagine a very ordinary moment. You're walking, not running, not exercising intensely, just a few steps to your car, around the block, or down a grocery aisle. Now pause for a second. If someone could freeze time and look inside your chest right now, what would your heart look like? Calm and steady? Or quietly working harder than you realize? That quiet question sits at the heart of today's video. What walking really does to your heart, according to a cardiologist. Then is relation die and active life marking. And the answer may completely reshape how you think about movement, cardiovascular health, and the power of small daily habits. Most people assume walking is too gentle to matter, something nice but insignificant. Modern cardiovascular science tells a very different story. Even a short walk can begin changing how your heart pumps, how your blood vessels respond, and how much pressure your system carries throughout the day. No drama, no exhaustion, just subtle, measurable biology at work. In this video, we're not chasing motivation slogans or arbitrary step counts. Instead, we'll explore what actually happens inside your heart and blood vessels minute by minute when you walk through the lens of clinical research and cardiology. If you've ever believed that heart health requires extreme workouts or intense suffering, stay with us until the end. And if you value clear, science-based explanations without hype or fear, make sure to subscribe and follow the channel, because this is exactly the kind of knowledge that can quietly change how you care for your body every single day. When we talk about cardiovascular health, most people immediately focus on the heart, a central organ, a powerful muscle that must beat relentlessly for decades. But what often goes unexplained is this: the heart is rarely the first problem. In most cases, the heart is responding to the environment it's forced to operate within, and that environment is the vascular system. Think of the heart as a water pump in a house. The pump itself may be perfectly functional, strong, and intact. But if the pipes gradually become stiff, narrow, or poorly responsive, what happens next? The pump has to increase pressure. It works harder, longer, and under more strain just to move the same amount of water. Over time, it's not the pump that fails first, it's the system wearing it down. The human body follows the same logic. When movement is limited and sitting dominates daily life, blood vessels are no longer regularly challenged. They slowly lose their natural elasticity. The vessel walls become less responsive, less willing to expand when blood flow increases. As a result, the heart must generate higher pressure to push blood through the system, not because the heart is weak, but because the pathway has become resistant. This is where walking enters the story, not as a calorie-burning activity, but as a system-level adjustment signal. When you walk, even at a comfortable pace, blood flow increases in a steady, controlled manner. It's not explosive. It's not stressful. It's more like running clean water through pipes on a daily basis, preventing stagnation. The inner lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, senses this flow. And when stimulated appropriately, it releases biological signals that encourage the vessels to relax, widen, and cooperate with the blood moving through them. The key insight here is this: walking does not force the heart to overwork. It reduces the invisible resistance the heart has been pushing against. As blood vessels regain flexibility, overall vascular resistance drops. The heart no longer has to fight the system. Each heartbeat becomes more efficient, less strained. Over time, this mechanism underlies why consistent walking is associated with more stable blood pressure, lower resting heart rate, and long-term cardiovascular risk reduction. This also explains why walking often feels calming rather than exhausting. The body doesn't interpret it as a threat. The nervous system doesn't shift into a fight-or-flight mode. Instead, the cardiovascular system enters a kind of intelligent maintenance state, where efficiency improves without force. So if you've ever dismissed walking as too simple to matter, remember this: sometimes the most powerful change isn't applying more pressure, but creating a system that requires less of it. And by improving the environment your heart works in, starting with your blood vessels, walking offers one of the most underestimated forms of cardiovascular support available. Once we understand that walking isn't merely about burning calories, but about easing and recalibrating the entire cardiovascular system, a natural question follows. How do these changes actually unfold over time? Not weeks or months later, but starting the very moment you begin to walk. From the first few minutes, your body shifts out of stillness. As you stand up and move, large muscles in your legs begin asking for slightly more oxygen. It's not a dramatic surge, but a gentle request to the cardiovascular system. Activity has begun. The heart responds immediately by adjusting its rhythm, beating a bit faster and a bit stronger like a smart engine, increasing output as a car starts rolling. This isn't stress. It's instant adaptability. At the same time, blood flow becomes more rhythmic. The inner lining of your blood vessels, highly sensitive to flow patterns, detects this change. As blood brushes past the vessel walls in a steady stream, the endothelium activates biological signals that allow the vessels to relax just enough to accommodate the flow. You don't feel this happening, but it quietly sets the foundation for everything that follows. As walking continues, the body moves beyond reaction and into redistribution. Blood vessels become more cooperative, allowing the same volume of blood to move with less resistance. Over time, this reduces the mechanical load placed on the system. Breathing also begins to shift. Without conscious effort, breaths deepen and slow slightly, matching the pace your body has chosen for the activity. This breathing pattern carries an important downstream effect. The nervous system begins to recalibrate. Rather than staying in a heightened alert state, the body leans towards stability and regulation. This is why many people describe walking as mentally clearing. It's not that problems disappear, but that the body stops treating mild effort as a threat. With sustained walking, the body enters a deeper phase, not one of exhaustion, but of system training. The heart isn't just responding beat by beat anymore, it's learning efficiency. With repetition, each contraction can move more blood, allowing the heart to beat less frequently at rest. This gradual shift toward efficiency is a hallmark of a well-adapted cardiovascular system. Meanwhile, the blood vessels themselves are being trained. Daily cycles of gentle expansion and relaxation keep them responsive. Much like regularly bending an elastic material maintains its flexibility. Over days and weeks, vessels learn to respond smoothly to demand rather than resisting it with stiffness. Crucially, this process doesn't require long or intense walks every time. Consistency matters more than intensity. The human body adapts through repeated signals, not extreme efforts. Each walk sends a clear, steady message. This system needs flexibility, not alarm. As these signals accumulate, baseline physiology begins to shift. Resting heart rate trends lower. Recovery from stress improves. Everyday activities feel less taxing. These changes aren't driven by motivation or willpower, but by biological adaptation. At this point, walking is no longer about individual steps. It becomes a story about how time, rhythm, and repetition can reshape a system designed to adapt if we give it the chance. As we step back and look at the physiological changes that unfold minute by minute during walking, a clear truth emerges. The cardiovascular system does not require dramatic stress to adapt. It responds to small signals as long as those signals are consistent. And this is where one of the most persistent myths about exercise begins to unravel. The belief that only a lot counts. For years, 10,000 steps has been treated as a universal benchmark, a psychological pass-fail line. You either hit it or you didn't. But biology doesn't operate on scorecards. The body doesn't wait for perfection before adapting. In fact, it often responds most powerfully when you move from doing almost nothing to doing just a little. Large-scale observational data from recent years reveal something striking. Meaningful cardiovascular benefits begin to appear when daily step counts increase from roughly 2,000 to just 2,500 or 2,700 steps. That's not a long walk. It might be a few extra errands, a short loop around the house, or a brief walk after a meal. Yet to the cardiovascular system, it represents a clear environmental shift. That signal is processed quickly. Blood vessels are stimulated more often. The heart is no longer operating in a passive, underused state. Baseline pressure dynamics begin to ease. This effect is especially pronounced in previously sedentary individuals, where early gains are often disproportionately large. In other words, the first steps carry the highest biological return. As activity levels continue to rise, benefits still accumulate, but not linearly. The curve begins to flatten. This is where the concept of an optimal zone comes into play. Around 7,000 steps per day, the cardiovascular system appears to receive most of the signals it needs to remain flexible, efficient, and resilient. Beyond that point, additional gains are real, but smaller relative to the effort required. This understanding isn't about encouraging less effort. It's about removing unnecessary pressure. When people realize their bodies don't demand perfection, they're more likely to build sustainable habits. Instead of cycling between intense bursts and burnout, they adopt a moderate, repeatable rhythm that fits real life. This perspective also opens an important door. Benefits don't disappear just because activity isn't daily. Many people struggle to move consistently due to work, caregiving, or fatigue. Yet evidence suggests that even achieving higher step counts on 1 or 2 days per week still offers meaningful protection compared to doing none at all. The body doesn't track your calendar, it integrates signals over time. That insight carries a deeply human message. Cardiovascular health isn't reserved for those with ideal schedules. It can be built in small windows, weekends, occasional free afternoons, or days when energy allows. Each instance reinforces the same message to the system. Remain adaptable, remain capable. Most importantly, releasing fixation on numbers allows people to reconnect with their bodies. Walking stops being a task to complete and becomes a collaboration with one's own biology. And it's from that collaboration that the most durable benefits quietly emerge. Once the pressure around step counts fades, a more nuanced layer of the story comes into focus. How you walk matters almost as much as how much you walk. At a deeper physiological level, cadence becomes a meaningful training signal not to push the body into suffering, but to teach the cardiovascular system how to manage slightly higher demand with calm precision. A moderately brisk walking pace does not turn movement into a battle. It doesn't force heart rate into alarm zones or trigger prolonged stress responses. Instead, it creates a gentle challenge space where the heart and blood vessels must coordinate more precisely than during slow walking, while remaining fully within control. This is where its biological value lies in teaching the system to meet increased demand without panic. From a mechanical perspective, a faster cadence produces stronger, smoother blood flow. Vessel walls must expand more dynamically to accommodate that flow. The heart fine-tunes its rhythm and contraction strength to maintain stability. This is not overexertion, but intentional calibration. With repetition, the cardiovascular system learns to handle above-normal conditions gracefully, much like preparing infrastructure for peak loads while everyday operation remains quiet. Importantly, the benefit of cadence is not measured by discomfort. The real indicator is sustainability. A pace that feels purposeful, yet still allows short conversation, often signals an ideal adaptive zone. In this range, the cardiovascular system receives a clear learning signal, while the nervous system remains stable enough to support recovery. Over time, brisk but manageable walks create baseline physiological shifts. The heart becomes more flexible in accelerating and decelerating. Blood vessels respond more smoothly to changes in flow. Everyday demands stairs, quick movement, busy days stop feeling disproportionately taxing. In this way, a modest increase in pace quietly expands the cardiovascular safety margin. Cadence also reconnects movement with bodily awareness. Walking at a purposeful pace invites attention to breathing, rhythm, and balance. That awareness reduces overexertion and supports long-term consistency. Exercise becomes a dialogue rather than a command. So when speed matters, it doesn't mean always walking fast. It means that occasionally adding just a touch of pace enriches the biological message sent to the heart and vessels. No suffering required, only enough challenge to teach the system one more lesson in adaptability. And it is these small, repeated lessons that quietly build lasting cardiovascular health. After understanding how cadence refines the cardiovascular system's ability to handle higher demand, the story naturally shifts to a very specific moment of the day, the period immediately after a meal. Often overlooked, this window is one of the most important physiological moments for both metabolic and cardiovascular health. Following a meal, the body enters a state of energy processing. Blood glucose rises, insulin is released, and blood flow is redirected toward digestion. In a flexible, well-adapted system, this transition is smooth. But for many people, especially those with metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, or sedentary habits, the post-meal period becomes a quiet stressor on the vascular system. Sharp and repeated glucose spikes don't just affect sugar levels. They directly influence the endothelium, the delicate lining of blood vessels responsible for regulating dilation, constriction, and vascular responsiveness. Frequent glucose surges create a less favorable environment for endothelial function, increasing biological strain over time. This mechanism is one of the subtle contributors to long-term cardiovascular risk. Light walking after meals intervenes in this process in a remarkably gentle way. No intensity is required. No long duration. Movement alone allows working muscles to draw glucose from the bloodstream not only through insulin-dependent pathways, but also through insulin-independent mechanisms. The result is a flattening of post-meal glucose peaks, reducing the amplitude of metabolic stress placed on blood vessels. At the same time, blood flow is redistributed more evenly throughout the body. Rather than remaining pooled in one system, circulation becomes gently activated. The endothelium once again receives a familiar signal: steady, moderate flow without shock. This environment supports healthy vessel function and relaxation. In this sense, post-meal walking protects blood vessels at one of their most vulnerable moments. Importantly, this effect isn't limited to people with diagnosed metabolic conditions. Even in healthy individuals, repeated daily glucose spikes create cumulative stress. Walking after meals doesn't erase modern eating patterns, but it softens the metabolic edges enough to reduce unnecessary cardiovascular strain over years. This strategy is also uniquely practical. It doesn't require extra workout time or structured exercise sessions. It simply uses a window that already exists: a short walk, a few minutes of movement, or avoiding immediate, prolonged sitting after eating sends a powerful biological message. The system is supported, not overwhelmed. Over time, these small post-meal interventions compound. Glucose regulation improves. Vascular stress decreases. The heart operates in a more stable internal environment. Most importantly, the body learns that even metabolically demanding moments can be handled smoothly. That is why post-meal walking functions as a quiet protective window. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't advertise itself. But it consistently safeguards cardiovascular health where it matters most, in the subtle transitions that shape long-term biology. When small post-meal interventions are repeated day after day, the impact of walking extends far beyond the immediate moment. What begins as a gentle action leaves measurable, long-term biological traces, changes that researchers can track, quantify, and link directly to real-world cardiovascular risk. From a blood pressure perspective, multiple intervention studies and population analyses show that consistent walking is associated with modest but durable reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. The numbers may appear small, often just a few millimeters of mercury, but over years, these shifts carry meaningful physiological weight. Lower baseline pressure reduces cumulative strain on vessel walls, decreases chronic workload on the heart, and translates into a tangible reduction in cardiovascular risk over time. Alongside blood pressure, resting heart rate is another marker frequently observed. Individuals who walk regularly tend to develop lower resting heart rates, not because the heart slows pathologically, but because each beat becomes more efficient. With greater stroke volume, the heart no longer needs to beat as often to meet resting demands. This efficiency is a classic sign of a cardiovascular system trained for economy rather than constant urgency. Large-scale population studies further reinforce the connection between walking habits and lower rates of cardiovascular events, including heart disease and all-cause mortality. Importantly, these associations are not limited to high-intensity exercisers. They emerge clearly at moderate levels of activity, underscoring a critical message. Benefits arise from biological consistency, not extremes. Yet one of the most meaningful long-term changes is harder to capture in charts, but frequently noted in clinical practice. The body's perception of effort changes. In people who walk consistently, everyday movements, standing up, climbing stairs, walking briskly, are less likely to trigger alarm responses. Heart rate rises less dramatically for the same effort. Breathing steadies more quickly after exertion. Sensations of breathlessness or fatigue diminish. Stress recovery improves as well. After physical or emotional strain, heart rate and blood pressure return to baseline more rapidly. This reflects a cardiovascular system that is flexible and confident, rather than locked-in prolonged alert mode. Biologically, it signals a system that can distinguish true threats from ordinary demands. These foundational shifts represent the deepest value of walking. They aren't dramatic or flashy, but they quietly reshape how the heart, blood vessels, and nervous system coordinate each day. From that stable foundation, the most durable forms of cardiovascular health are built not through intensity, but through intelligent repetition. After seeing the long-term changes walking can produce in blood pressure, heart rate, and stress recovery, it's important to place those benefits within the right safety context. Any health strategy, no matter how gentle, only works when it respects individual biology. Walking is widely considered one of the safest forms of physical activity. It places minimal stress on joints, requires no complex skills, and allows the body to self-regulate intensity based on internal feedback. For most people, it's an ideal entry point into movement without triggering overload or fear responses. Still, safe does not mean ignoring warning signs. Certain signals deserve careful attention. Chest pain or pressure during exertion, dizziness or fainting, severe or worsening shortness of breath. These are not sensations to push through. The same applies to individuals with known heart disease, uncontrolled high blood pressure, recent surgery, or conditions affecting balance. In these situations, consulting a healthcare professional before starting or changing a walking routine is a wise and protective step. This isn't about discouraging movement. It's about placing movement in the right biological frame. A clinician can help define appropriate duration, pace, and progression so the body adapts gradually instead of being stressed. For those with balance concerns, walking environment, stable surfaces, good lighting, supportive footwear becomes just as important as intensity. One foundational principle matters here. Walking is not a test of willpower. It doesn't require pushing through pain or discomfort to prove commitment. Its value lies in responsiveness. Mild exertion is expected. Sharp pain, lightheadedness, or unusual breathlessness are cues to pause. Within a safety-aware context, walking becomes a collaboration with the body rather than a confrontation. You're not forcing the cardiovascular system beyond its capacity. You're inviting it to adapt. Respecting current limits is what allows long-term improvements to unfold sustainably. So when we talk about safety, the message isn't fear, it's understanding. Walking is safe not because it's easy, but because it allows continuous adjustment to your own signals. And in cardiovascular health, no signal is more reliable than the one coming from within. When we step back and view the full story, walking stops being a small habit or a light form of exercise. It reveals itself as an ancient biological language, deeply embedded in human evolution and now confirmed by modern science. Humans were never designed to remain sedentary for long stretches and then compensate with extreme effort. Our ancestors moved frequently, at moderate intensity, throughout the day not to train, but to survive. The heart, blood vessels, nervous system, and metabolism evolved to function optimally in that environment. Steady movement, manageable demand, and minimal prolonged alarm. Walking is the closest modern behavior to that evolutionary template. It doesn't trigger excessive survival responses. It doesn't force the heart into battle. Instead, it sends a clear and familiar signal. The environment is safe, demand is reasonable, efficiency is preferred. Modern science now allows us to observe what intuition long suggested. From sustained reductions in blood pressure and lower resting heart rate to improved vascular flexibility and faster recovery from stress, the evidence points to one conclusion. Walking doesn't just improve numbers. It re-educates how the cardiovascular system responds to life itself. At a deeper level, this extends beyond heart health. A body that isn't constantly overactivated recovers better, tolerates stress more effectively, and ages more slowly. Walking doesn't make us immortal, but it allows our systems to operate as they were designed to, and that alignment is the foundation of long-term health. Perhaps the most reassuring truth is this: perfection is not required. Not 10,000 steps, not pain, not force, just small, correctly timed, repeatedly delivered signals. Biology doesn't reward extremes, it rewards consistency. In the end, walking is not merely exercise. It is a daily message to the heart and blood vessels that the world is manageable. And in an era defined by chronic pressure, that message may be one of the most powerful forms of medicine we still underestimate. And if this perspective resonates with you, the idea that health doesn't come from forcing the body, but from understanding how biology truly works, then you're in the right place. This channel exists to help you understand your body through modern science, without hype, without fear, and without turning health into exhaustion. If you want to keep exploring how your heart, metabolism, and nervous system actually function in daily life through walking, nutrition, stress, and recovery, make sure to subscribe and follow the channel. Each week, we'll break down simple behaviors that carry powerful biological meaning. Because health doesn't need to be complicated. It needs to be in rhythm. And that journey often begins with something as small and as powerful as your next step.